As academia and medical research have become politicized, high-quality research casting doubt on affirmation has been suppressed, and low-quality research in its favor gets fast-tracked to publication. In 2020, the National Institute for Care and Health Excellence, NICE, the official body tasked with assessing the effectiveness of treatment options within Britain's National Health Service, produced reviews of the evidence for prescribing puberty blockers and cross-sex hormones for childhood and adolescent gender dysphoria. It ranked the standard of evidence as very low in every category it considered. Every single study that found any benefit for puberty blockers, it concluded, could represent changes that are either of questionable clinical value, or the studies themselves are not reliable and changes could be due to confounding, bias, or chance. Solid evidence of benefits for cross-sex hormones prescribed to teenagers, it said, was similarly non-existent. One paper published in January 2020 in Pediatrics, a high-impact journal, claims that puberty blockers make it less likely that a person will consider suicide. But an analysis by Michael Biggs of Oxford University published a few months later in Archives of Sexual Behaviour, the journal edited by Ken Zucker, shows that it is catastrophically flawed. The analysis is based on data extracted from a low-quality, non-representative online survey. No attempt was made to ensure that respondents were in America, or to stop people responding repeatedly. Each response was entered into a prize draw. The survey is known to have elicited nonsensical answers about whether respondents had taken puberty blockers. Most who said they had were already older than 16 when the drugs were first used in gender medicine in the US. And finally, there was no attempt to adjust for pre-existing differences between those who took blockers, or said they had, and those who said they would have liked to. Clinicians would have been less likely to give the drugs to people with severe mental health issues, for example, who would then be more likely to contemplate suicide for reasons unrelated to not getting blockers. Another widely reported paper, also published in 2020, claimed that undergoing conversion therapy aimed at changing someone's gender identity is associated with worse future mental health. It, too, has been subjected to an article-length demolition by other researchers. It is based on the same flawed survey, and so is doomed before the data analysis even starts. But the problems do not stop there. The paper conflates all sorts of therapeutic interactions: voluntary and coerced, those with diagnostic and therapeutic aims, those where the primary purpose is related to gender identity, and those where it is not. Anyone who had detransitioned was excluded, a serious omission, since such people are among those most likely to have been harmed by gender affirmation. The survey provided no information on respondents' initial state of mental health, making it plausible that those who remembered more interactions with therapists were the ones who had worse mental health to begin with. And finally, the main result, that people who reported more interactions also reported worse mental health, is based on a measure of perceptions of distress, which is by no means the same thing. Despite the lack of evidence, the American Academy of Pediatrics, AAP, claims that gender affirmation is the only ethical treatment for gender dysphoric children. Its position paper was written by an activist-led subcommittee, and is so far from evidence-based that a paper debunking it point by point ran in the Journal of Sex and Marital Therapy in 2019. In order to ensure that the AAP could not later claim ignorance of his critique, the author, James Cantor, a Canadian sexologist, mailed it to the heads of the organisation's main committees. He received 3 confirmations of receipt, but no responses. "I largely wrote that paper to be used when someone brings a court case," he says. "That was why I wrote it the way I did, down to referring to specific sentences to make it easy to cite." The misrepresentations are egregious. Remarkably, not only did the AAP statement fail to include any of the actual outcomes literature on such cases, but it also misrepresented the contents of its citations, which repeatedly said the very opposite of what the AAP attributed to them, Cantor writes. For example, the AAP statement says that conversion therapy for children has proven not only unsuccessful, but also deleterious. But the sources it cites refer to sexual orientation, not gender identity, and therapy for adults, not children. The AAP told neither the truth nor the whole truth, he concludes, committing sins both of commission and of omission, asserting claims easily falsified by anyone caring to do any fact-checking at all. The lack of decent research and misrepresentation of findings mean gender affirmation cannot even be described as a risky experiment on children, since experiment implies someone, somewhere, is tracking outcomes and comparing them with other options. But what can be said with some certainty is that it is not so much a treatment for gender dysphoria as a means to ensure that cross-sex identification persists. That must be acknowledged when the costs and benefits are totted up.